Well, thank you so much for being on. I really appreciate it. I know you're really busy and have a lot going on in your life, so it really means a lot that you would take the time to kind of just sit down and chat.
Nah, I love you. It's good to see you. I'm happy to be here.
So for people who don't know you, I'm going to give a short little intro.
All right.
All right.
Get
Jade.
it right.
I know. You didn't give me much to work with.
I know. You're like, give me a bio. I'm like, I don't know, just Jade.
Yeah. All right. Well, I got a little more than that, but not much. Okay. Jade is an integrative physician, author, and co-founder of Metabolic Effect. You specialize in mindset, muscle, and metabolism. And today you do most of your work through jadeteta.com. Is that right?
That's right.
So
Yeah.
most of that is through that website. So tell me about Jade. Like what are you really passionate about? What makes you tick? I know you've sort of evolved over the past couple of years. You had Metabolic Effect. You're still connected to that, but not as much anymore. You're kind of doing some other things. So what's going on?
Well, you know what? It's funny. I feel like I'm so lucky because I'm actually doing exactly the kind of things that I was interested in at 18 years old, which was self-help, self-development, strength and conditioning, and nutrition. And so like sometimes I kind of pinch myself because I'm like, literally I was doing all this stuff as a teenager.
Yeah.
So the fact that I get to teach it and that people care about what I have to say in those regards is amazing. But I guess to give you guys an idea, I have always been, since 15 years old, I've been personal training, which a lot of people go, 15, how did that happen? I was writing programs for people on the football team. And then I would give programs to their mothers, so in high school. Yeah, right?
Wow.
So, I know, it's kind of, it's sort of.
That's your first business then, I guess, really. Yeah.
Kind of, yes. I guess they paid me in like Kool-Aid and cheeseburgers, but but it was, yes. And then I went through my first breakup at 18, and everyone knows what that's like. And so I was like, I really got into self-help and self-development at that time. Just started reading everything I could get my hands on. And then I decided to study biochemistry in undergrad. And then I went to medical school and went to a non-traditional medical school called Bastyr University, which is alternative and complementary medicine. So think of your primary care physician who specializes in diet and exercise, and that's what I do. And at the time, that was not a popular road to take. That was back in the late 90s, early 2000s, and my father even, who's always been supportive of everything I do, was like, Jade, do not do that. That's crazy. And it ended up working out pretty good because we had no idea back then that everyone was going to be into this stuff. So yeah, take a little bit of nature boy, throw in some strength conditioning person, throw in like philosopher and psychology, and then a healthy dose of nutrition and biochemistry. And I think you have an idea of what I do, what I love, and what I teach.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you started down the medical path and then it wasn't quite the right fit for you.
Definitely was not.
Yeah. Was that sort of a really hard change? I mean, scary for you to make that jump because like you said, it wasn't as popular when you did it. Right now it's like, well, I'm going to be a health coach. I'm going to go on functional medicine, naturopathic doctor, whatever. And that's like huge right now. There's a huge movement, which is great.
Yep.
But at the time that was probably kind of like, what is this going to be an okay career for me?
Kylene, it was terrifying, to be honest with you at the time. Like I look back now and I'm like, no big deal. Like I did this thing, but I remember at the time, probably everyone remembers, that kind of angst about what am I going to do with my life? And it felt like everything was on the line. And that's what it felt like. I literally agonized over that decision. And then I was just like, honestly, you just have to follow your heart. And I guess my parents were really instructive in that regard because they were just like, always do what you love. Money comes second. And so that's what I did. Took a big leap and it worked out great, and I would say, even if I wasn't making great money and wasn't, having people listen to what I'm saying, I still love what I do on a day-to-day basis. So I would be doing it still. So yeah, I'm very happy in hindsight, but at the time, and I know anyone who's like in business and, trying to get started in that regard, I mean, you hear it a lot, but I know the pain and the frustration and the fear around that, but I don't know for me, I just don't know that I could do it any other way. Even if, I was not doing well financially, it's like I probably would make ends meet somewhere else, but I'd have to be doing this.
Yeah. So when you graduated, did you end up having your own private practice or did you just go right into sort of the Metabolic Effect brand or what was your transition there?
Yeah, what I did, so this is another, so two very important inflection points for me. One, making the decision not to go to traditional medical school and to go to this other non-traditional medical school. That was huge. Well, after I got out of that school and graduated, I had another pivotal moment because I was starting a business and I was working for a gym, and they offered me at the time $85K to start out of school and to basically run this business and be a physician in Washington State where I had my license. And I was like, honestly, I do not want to do primary care medicine. I knew that after being in clinic. I was like, I don't want to do that. Exams and all that kind of stuff. I was like, no, thank you. That's not for me. So again, I took a big leap and called my mother and father. I was like, Dad. He's like, what? I was like, listen, I'm coming home. He said, oh, that's great. That's great. I said, I'm going to live with you. He goes, what? I said, can I live with you and Mom for a couple years? Now, of course, I'm in my early 30s.
Yeah.
And he's like, are you sure you want to do that? I said, if it's cool with you. He goes, I would love that. Because, my father just wants his boys around him and his kids around him. So I went home and just grinded it out for 5 years. Started a consulting practice. So for those who don't know what that is, that's basically me saying, hey, look, anyone who's got health conditions that are not happy with the way it's been treated by traditional docs, come and see me, but I'm not going to manage your primary care because I didn't have a license in North Carolina where I was. And that worked out great. So I started making good money doing that. I was like, oh, I can do well at this. And then I started a company called Metabolic Effect where I started with a boot camp outdoors, and it just took off from there. And then I started a blog and wrote a book, and all that stuff sort of panned out. Oh, that's what I'm talking about. Worst name for a book ever, by the way, but I'm just saying.
What I laugh about, so it's funny. So I met you like I think it was September.
Yeah.
And it was funny because I saw your name on the speaker list and I was like, oh my gosh, because I listen to all these podcasts like the Model Health Show and things like that. I was like, I recognize that name, and I think that I might even have his book. And so I came home after I had talked with you and I was like, yeah, that's it. It was so funny about this because the title of it, for people who aren't watching videos, Lose Weight Here, like 2 pages in, you clarify, you're like, you can't spot check weight loss.
Exactly.
It's the funniest thing. But yeah, I was skimming through that last night. I was like, well, maybe there's some questions I should ask him about this. But
yeah, it's funny. That book, I'll tell you guys an interesting story about self-publishing versus publishing. Now, I published that book with HarperCollins. No, that one with Rodale, my first book with HarperCollins. It's a pretty big deal to be with one of the big houses, but they control everything at that point. So you don't get to call the book really what you want. You have some input, but ultimately they decide. And that was the best title out of all the titles. And in my opinion, I don't like the way that the publishing world works, because they get to they don't really know what to do with a big, bald guy like me that looks how I look, but also does female fat loss, so right. they really struggle to understand how to, kind of brand me, and I struggle with that actually, because I wear so many hats, so it was interesting. So I'm probably going to self-publish my next. I have several books that are partly done. One that's coming out very soon that's in self-development, and I'm self-publishing from now on.
Oh, that's really interesting. That's really cool. So if you had your choice, what would you have titled that book?
Probably something along the lines of The Metabolic Detective or something like that. The Metabolic Edge. My first book was Metabolic Effect. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to call this book The Metabolic Edge. The metabolic, something with metabolism to carry that brand through.
Sure.
And I think it was a big mistake that we didn't call it that, actually.
That's all right.
My first book, interestingly enough, because Metabolic Effect was so successful, my first book sells way better than that second book. And that second book, from my point of view, and this will give you guys some insight. This is funny, right? I don't know if you've ever done a creative work where when I finished that book, and I've told Jill this, those who don't know, Jill's my ex-wife, and she's like one of my best friend, right? And I told her, I was like,
she's in the book too. Her picture's in the book.
She's in the book, exactly. So me and her are always talking about this, and she's like, so are you ever going to put out another metabolism book? And I'm like, honestly, that book that I wrote is like, to me, like it's like the pinnacle of what I can do. There's nothing more to add, from my perspective. And so I don't know that I'll ever put out another metabolism.
This one or the first one?
The second one, Lose Weight Here. That's why that to me is the quintessential book on metabolism. It's just, I'm almost like I want to self-publish that same book with a different name.
With a different name. Why not?
I don't think Rodale will be too happy about that.
A few tweaks here and there. It's not the same book, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
But that book really, to me, was it clarified from my perspective what goes wrong with people when they think about metabolism. It is the book that really says, look, here's how metabolism works. You've been thinking about it all wrong. And it was the book I really always wanted to write.
Yeah. So. And this one's co-authored with your brother, right?
Yeah. Kylene and I wrote both of our books together. And so cool. Yeah, Kylene is a pretty amazing guy, actually, because he sits in the background. He's my older brother. And he just is, he's more like, he likes to do clinic stuff. And he doesn't really like to be out front. Both of us are a little bit more on the introverted side, although people don't think that about me. But Kylene likes to sit in the background, but he's amazing. So the fact that he lets me do this and he just doesn't care is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Yeah. So you had 2 books with your brother, but then you've written some others on your own, or you're in development? Because on your website, I wasn't sure if they were like online programs or actual physical books that you would receive, but it looked like you've authored several things on your own.
Yeah, and actually, so for people who are interested in business, because I think you're the people who listen to you are, into business and they're into fitness and they're into all that stuff, right? So I'll give you some background into the business side. I hooked up with, this is funny, by the way, this is so amazing how life works. These people call me up and they're like, Jade, we want to publish some books with you. We are an online publisher. And I'm like, yeah, no thanks. I'm real busy and all that. I get these kind of offers all the time. They're like, no, we really want to do this with you. We're kind of like the beach body on the online space. And I'm like, yeah, I'm busy. I was kind of poo-pooing it, right? Because I was busy, but we're always busy. And then someone mentioned something about this company. I was like, oh, yeah, they just contacted me. So then I went and looked, and I was like, wow, these guys are the biggest people in the online space, but no one really knows about them. They at the time, they were the only ones doing like $1 million launches with a $20 product, right? Which is unheard of. And they're still doing that. So they said, look, we want to do this. So I was like, you know what? All right, I'll do it with them. If I make, $10K, I'll be happy. Like, whatever. I just want to learn from them. They're the best of the best. Those books have sold 10 to 20 times more than my other 2 books that were done with traditional publishing. I mean, wow. And I've done 3 with them, and eventually they ended up buying part of Metabolic Effect, or I absorbed part of Metabolic Effect. So that's just an interesting lesson of like, this is this situation where I was like, you know what, I'm just going to try it. I can learn something from them. And it turned out to be, something pretty amazing. But I was completely detached. I had no real expectations. I was just like, I'm just going to learn. And I've learned in business that for me, that's the best way to approach things. You go in different directions. You say, you really say no a lot. But when you have something that could really teach you something you don't know, that's when you say yes, regardless of what the money is. And sometimes it works out well for you. But those are books and online programs, books and video programs. So they're actually, in my mind, a much better value than a book that you can get from Amazon, because it's a really nicely done books, and then a whole 8-week to 12-week video-based exercise program that goes along with them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's funny because they're kind of hidden in the background. They target very specific people with those programs. So they're typically like women between the ages of 35 and 65. If you're online, you'll see these things, a lot of menopause stuff that I do. And otherwise, you won't see those books, but they just do really well because they know how to market them.
Yeah. So I want to get into some of those topics because you do say it's always surprising. You talk about the female cycle a lot. You talk about working around your cycle. You talk about menopause a lot. A lot of guys don't touch on that. A lot of women don't touch on that.
Yeah.
But so what are, like, what are just some main differences when you talk about healthy women? I'm not talking about anyone with like chronic diseases right now, but the difference between men and women, what are some main differences in our approach, or should be in our approach to nutrition and fitness?
Well, here, it's a very simple way to look at this, actually, right? It's like, bottom line is women get pregnant and women have to carry a baby, right? And this tells you everything about the female metabolism, because from the male perspective, we don't have to worry about that. So our metabolism isn't trying to calculate, can I reproduce in that regard, right? We have you have a much more narrow women sort of stress apparatus. In other words, you are going to be super sensitive to stress. And the cycle of a woman is really interesting because it's sort of like telling you, okay, you can handle a little bit more stress right now, and you have to be a little more careful with your stress later on. Mm-hmm. And so the big difference, though, is to kind of think about your metabolism is saying to itself, am I healthy enough to have a baby, to carry that baby to term, and then to support that baby? And so the metabolism is always looking at it from my point of view when I think about women through that lens. And so as soon as you start having, as a woman, issues with hunger, energy, and cravings is one, and that's the same with men, but more for women, as soon as you start seeing your libido crash, as soon as you start having menstrual issues, all of those kinds of things, you can pretty much guarantee your metabolism is not that happy with you. And so if you think of the metabolism as a stress barometer, women have a much more sensitive stress barometer. And this tells you a little bit about why women struggle with some of the stuff out there that everyone says you should do. Fasting can work really well for women, and it can be a complete disaster for women, right? Keto diets can work well for some women and be a complete disaster for other women. Strict dieting can be a complete disaster. Too much cardio can be a complete disaster. So whereas a man can push himself a little bit further and like get himself in trouble and bounce back pretty easily, a woman always has to be like, what's my Goldilocks zone?
Yeah.
And I'll give you just, I'll give you guys, the women listening, just a little bit to kind of think about this just really quickly. If you've never heard about this, think about it like this, right? So day one of menses, first day of bleeding, up to ovulation, that's called the follicular phase. And during that phase, estrogen dominates. Now, estrogen is a really, really big stress shield. It shields you from a lot of stress. It also has some testosterone-like action. It helps you hold on to muscle. It helps you sensitize your body to insulin. And so when estrogen is around like that, you can handle more stress. You can eat more without getting fat. And you can train harder. But then, and what would that tell you, right? What your body's doing is like, let's prepare the body to be ready for implantation of an egg, basically. And then comes ovulation, the egg is released. Now you're in the luteal phase. And at this time, the body says, hey, let's relax, let's calm down, let's make sure that this egg gets implanted and we can bring this baby to term, right? Now, whether you're thinking about that or not, that's what your body is thinking. And so the second half, you need to be thinking about that from the metabolism perspective. It wants to relax and chill during that sort of luteal phase. And then once menses starts, and this is interesting in the research, a lot of women don't know this, and they also always tell me, Jade, it's the last time I want to perform. But if you want to perform your best, if you're an athletic woman, the best thing to do is, believe it or not, based on the research, it hints at this, is to time your performance, especially if you're doing anaerobic stuff, if you're a sprinter or lifter, with menses, which women would be like, oh my God, that's the last thing I want to do is try to perform or have an event during menses. But apparently women are stronger at that point in time, and because their metabolism starts looking a lot more like a man because both estrogen and progesterone are low. But I don't know. Hopefully that explains it. It's not too complicated, not too long-winded, but that's the way to think about the female metabolism. Your stress means everything to you, and it's much more difficult to manage than a man.
I know. It's really annoying. I've been there.
Yeah.
So kind of along that route, what are like some of the top ways that you think women damage their metabolism, whether it be from overexercise or not listening to that stress response?
Yeah.
What are some of the top struggles that they hit?
Well, and this is going to get into sort of a philosophical and psychological conversation as well.
That's all right. Let's do it.
Yeah, I've worked with women my whole life. And what I will say is I don't, as a man and all my guy friends, we do not have near the same pressure as women to look good, to present a particular way. We get a lot of leeway, right? And so there's a huge amount of pressure, I feel like, on women to look good, to do everything, to be a good mom, to be the career person, especially now, right? And this is, to me, what happens is because women sort of go into this like, I have to do everything. And there's this tremendous amount of pressure to be thin, to be smart, to earn money, to manage the household, to be a good mom, to do all these things. And to me, that's the big mistake that women oftentimes make. And here's the thing. And they also, compared to men, don't like to ask for help a lot either, because they're just like, I need to take care of everything. And I would say, so I know you're like, oh, well, too much cardio or too much this and that. But I would say the number one thing that I've seen is that I sit in sessions with women my whole career, and I'm just like, I cannot believe the amount of stuff you are doing on a daily basis. I literally could not. So on the one hand, I say you're super stress sensitive. On the other end, I mean, speaking to men and women, seem like the ones that are doing freaking everything. And that's really, that's an honest assessment of things. And so then I go, the first step for a woman is to essentially say, I have got to switch out of this mindset of trying to be everything and do everything and pick and choose my battles, because that will then roll over into food and exercise and everything else. So once we get that out of the way, then yes, then you have women are also like, I need to over exercise and I need to under eat, which is the last thing you really want to do with your metabolism. Here's a way to think about this from, the stress barometer female metabolism point of view. Your metabolism does not care about your timetables. It does not care about your vanity concerns. It could care less about your convenience. It's going to do what it's going to do. And what it wants to do is it wants to run through this cycle, and it wants to keep itself healthy and flexible, right? So you have to look at your metabolism and think to yourself, okay, the metabolism does not respond well if I do extreme things for extreme periods of time. I'll say that again. I cannot do extreme things for extreme periods of time. And this is oftentimes what women will do. They'll just be like, I'm going to cardio it out for the next 5 years. I'm going to eat less and exercise more for my entire life. Right. And your metabolism goes, sorry, I don't like that. And that is what happens. The metabolism wants to be flexible and wants to be changeable. And if you embrace that with the lifestyle, it can be pretty cool, right? Because maybe one day you're out with the kids and they're wanting to, you're out playing and you're not eating much and you're just running around here and there and you get nothing in your, not a whole lot of food. Fine. The metabolism likes that. Maybe you do that 2 days in a row. Fine. The metabolism likes that. But you need to have a day where you're like, crushing the chicken fingers and the French fries and, having a day on the couch as well and embracing that stuff instead of thinking, oh, like I need to, your body likes that changeable nature. Yeah. And if you time it with the menstrual cycle, you can kind of go, all right, I need to relax with the exercise, relax with the self-editing, relax with the to-do list in the luteal phase leading up to menses and, crush things and get things done early on in the cycle. These are all ways that women can begin to keep their metabolism flexible. Just remember this. If you try with the metabolism, if you try to do the same thing over and over and over again for long periods of time, your metabolism just starts laughing at you. It's just like, yep, not going to work. And it sort of keeps getting worse and worse and worse and pushing back against you. Before you know it, now you're fatigued, you're tired, you have no libido, you have menstrual issues. You got all these issues going on. You can't figure it out. And it's simply because you have been trying to over-exercise and over-diet for too long. And now you need to give your metabolism a break. And most women, again, the reason I bring up this thing about women have a lot of pressure on them to look good that men don't have is that women can't necessarily always tolerate the idea that, oh, if I eat a little bit more sometimes, I may gain some water weight. It's not going to be fat for one weekend of overdoing it, but you will gain some water weight. You might not look as good, so to speak, for a few days. And a lot of women do not and cannot tolerate that, right? So they're just like, and honestly, the metabolism sort of needs that. I oftentimes tell people when they come to see me, I would say to them, I can help you, but you have to understand that I've done this long enough to know that before you're actually not going to look as good as you want to look in the short term. Yeah. You're going to look worse. You're going to gain some water weight. You're going to gain some body fat. You're going to gain because your metabolism needs to feel like it is like, oh, I have some resources. Now I can calm down a little bit instead of you being like, what can I do? Can I detox? Can I do more intervals? Can I do this and that? Should I do 100 push-ups a day? What about sit-ups? Should I do that? Should I do this? I heard about this and that. I'm like, you need to stop all that for a little while and just walk and relax. That's how you get back.
Yeah. I love that because I'm constantly telling people to listen to their body, and sometimes they have to take a break. And the other part of that too, I feel like, is you get bored doing the same stuff all the time. If you want to stick with anything, whether it be staying in shape or anything at all, you have to shake it up. So when you're talking about doing something extreme for extreme periods of time, I mean, that gets boring. You got to figure out, well, maybe today's the yoga day, or maybe today I just take a walk with the kids, or, whatever it is, you go to park. But
I love that.
Yeah, but a lot of what goes into what you're talking about is stress, the accumulation of life stress when you're doing a lot of different things, and then you're mentally stressed, and then you're stressing out your body through trying to be perfect all the time physically, and then you're stressing out your body more with trying to control and micromanage everything that goes into your mouth every single day without that break. So can you talk about stress and how that affects your metabolism specifically?
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, let's talk about the way stress makes you feel really quickly so you can understand when you're under stress. This is the first concept that people have to understand, because they think, well, stress, I don't know. What does that really mean? It's this term that's so overused. Here's the way to think about stress in the body. Just think about it from one simple point of view. There's one stress that our body knows through millions of years of evolution. It knows it well. It's really the only form of stress, and that is starvation stress. It's the big chronic stress. Am I going to get food? And so what happens when the metabolism is under stress, it goes, I am under starvation. Either that or I'm under attack. So under attack would be short-term stress, but chronic stress is I am having starvation. I need to find food. How's the metabolism going to respond to that? The metabolism is going to say, I am hungry, find food. I am going to conserve energy. So my energy, I'll have times where my energy is really high and I'm feeling anxious, and times where I'm exhausted, right? I'm going to get cravings. Cortisol is a stress hormone, starts with a C. Think cortisol, cravings. We know that cortisol shuts down the motivation centers in the brain and turns on the reward center. So when you're under stress, you come home, you have salad all cut up in the refrigerator, and all you want to do is go to the grocery store and get some Haagen-Dazs. That tells you that cortisol is probably an issue for you. We all know what that's like. You can have all the best food there for you, but you're exhausted and all you want to do is eat, and you want to eat comfort foods. That means you're probably under stress. And then for women, it's just like I always tell women, libido is a huge one for women, because remember, it's all about your stress system is like, do I want to reproduce? So if you're libido and you're not uninterested in sex, this is a big piece of the puzzle for you as a woman. Or your menstrual cycle is very heavy, you're missing periods. This also tells you you're not wanting to reproduce. This is key. Now, here's the interesting thing, right? Now, I don't know how much people want to get into biochemistry, but a lot of times people probably know the hormone cortisol. You actually can't feel cortisol. So like this wired feeling that you feel when you're stressed out, that is not cortisol. You can't feel cortisol in that way. That's adrenaline. That's like, when you slam on the brakes, you almost get in an accident, you feel this rush of energy and you're kind of frantic. That is adrenaline, and that is short-term stress. That's the stress of being under attack, sort of the saber-tooth tiger. That is easily dealt with just doing, getting down and doing 100 push-ups or doing some wind sprints. You can deal with that really nicely. And that's what most people, they're like, okay, so if you're under adrenaline stress, if you're anxious, do something short and intense. But if you're under cortisol stress, this longer-term chronic stress, you need to relax. And the best way to do that is walking is one of the best, a slow, rhythmic movement. Research shows this very clearly. It's the only type of thing that actually sensitizes the body to insulin and lowers cortisol. So I talk about walking a lot, which I laugh about because in my younger years, I would have been like, if you told me I was the guy who's going to champion walking, I would have told you were crazy. Yeah. But walking is key. And then everything else that, I think women might want to do. Men don't do these things, but women would want to do. If you're like, they would probably say, oh, that sounds nice, but they don't give themselves time to do, which is hot bubble baths, Epsom salt baths, sauna therapies. Spa time is absolutely amazing. Time with kids and time with pets is great, except that it's sort of a bell-shaped curve, right? Because if you're too much, that becomes very, very stressful and you have no time for yourself. And so a lot of women I've worked with, it's just like, if you could take 30 minutes of, quiet time during the day, that's a great way. And it doesn't take a lot. As a matter of fact, 10 to 20-minute naps have been shown to reverse almost completely what happens with sleep deprivation, what happens with, sort of overstress, those kinds of things. And so if you are under cortisol stress, long-term stress, these are all the things that you want to do. And then one thing I always mention that everyone kind of giggles about, but sex and physical affection is an amazing stress reducer as well. So all those things are hugely important. How many of us are planning that versus how many of us are planning exercise? Now, I don't want people to get the wrong idea that exercise that we shouldn't do exercise. Yeah. It's just that too much of that is not a good thing. So with that, how you want to feel is like this. When you do a workout session, you want to feel tired but elated in a sense, right? Almost like energized and relaxed, basically, which seems kind of weird.
Right. Yeah. But you feel like you could get through the rest of your day. Yeah.
Absolutely. Feel like you can get through the rest of your day. And you almost feel like, I could go another 10 minutes. But most people nowadays, they go, I need to just crush myself so that I don't feel like I can do anything else. And then they're exhausted all day.
Yeah.
So I would say that that's the mistake that most people are making. They're doing too much, too frequent, too hard. And so if you're in that state and you want to take the brakes off of that, I wouldn't say stop doing exercise. I would just say dial it back to 3 times per week, and then start feeling better, and then add a day, add another day. And then as soon as you feel your hunger, your energy, your cravings, your libido, your menses start shifting back in a stressful state, then you stay right there. You back it off a little bit. And most people just go, well, my trainer or the guru or Jade or someone told me I should work out 6 days a week and do high intensity interval training and fast. And that is where you get in trouble, because your metabolism in your body way better than anyone else. So why are you listening to me really when your body is talking to you? So what I want to do, and I know you do the same thing, you and I both try to teach people to listen to their bodies, because it is telling them what they need to do with stress. But hopefully that gets some things.
Always. Yeah. With the different workouts, I feel like people are, I don't know if it's genetically predisposed or just their lifestyle or whatever, but I feel like some people really are good at running. Like my husband, for example, he loves to run. I hate it. Oh my gosh, I hate it. I do it, but sometimes I'm getting better at it, but he loves it. And to him, that's like a meditative state. That's very relaxing. So for him, it's like a super healthy, wonderful thing, because it actually diminishes stress.
And if you look at him, right, he's a thinner guy. He's very lean, right? And has he always been that way?
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is an interesting.
Building muscle for him is difficult. Running is like no problem.
Exactly. Whereas you're maybe more type 2 dominated, where you're like more sprint based or something like that. So here's one thing to think about, which is really interesting. Most of us think like someone like your husband looks the way he looks and he's so lean because he runs, right? That is actually not the case. He runs because it is an activity that is suited to his brain and his body.
Yes.
Right. And we don't think about it like that. Now, here's the interesting thing. Are there people who take up running and lose a lot of weight? Yes. But they are so in the minority as not to even be important. Most people who look good, who run, looked good to begin with, and their bodies are built for running. For me, for example, I started out playing soccer when I was my first sport before I was old enough to play football. And I remember my dad being like, after that season, he was like, so you want to go back out for soccer next year or not? And I was like, I was a young kid, and I was like, Dad, I hate it. He's like, what do you mean you hate it? I was like, I don't like all the running, right? And even then, I just wasn't built for that. Then I played football, which is the short, powerful burst of activity. And I excelled at that and loved it. And so we have to also go, it doesn't mean, by the way, never run. It just means if you don't like running, do it as do it because it can have benefits, but don't make it the dominant form of your activity. Right. Do it every once in a while with your husband so you guys can enjoy that together, but let him be the runner and you do something else that suits you.
You should see when we run together. It's so embarrassing. Like I can't tell you in the past 6 years how much I have improved in this area. Yeah. But when we initially got together, it was funny because we met, my girlfriend actually introduced us, but we initially spoke over Facebook. And one of my first messages to him was, I hate running. It's like not ever going to happen. And like, I'm serious. And he's like this ultra marathon runner, right? 3 months later, he had me running my first 5K. But when we run together, it's almost, he could basically like trot backwards. And I'm like, oh, after.
Well, you want, not only that, you're so tiny, and he's like how much taller than you. So it's like,
okay, thank you. See, I try to tell him, I'm like, honey.
you're like 5 strides for you to him.
I'm like the legs. It makes a difference.
It definitely
I'm
does.
right down here.
But see, it does speak to that whole thing. It's like, do what feels good to you. Don't try to be a marathon runner if that's not what suits you, you know?
Yeah, and it was very interesting for me too when I started lifting heavier weights. To me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so different because it's not like high intensity interval training and I'm not like out of breath all the time, but this like feels good for my body. And that it's just such an interesting thing. So I would like to encourage everyone to just try something new. If you've always been stuck in running or heavy lifting or yoga or whatever it is, and that's the only thing you've ever tried, like go take classes and try something different, because you don't know what your body's really going to respond to. And when you kind of figure that out, you're like, oh, this feels really good. And then while it's a healthy stress on your body, it's like a mental de-stress, and it actually kind of like helps you calm down in a positive way.
Absolutely. And here's the other thing I'll say about that. And don't make the mistake to think that exercise is going to help you lose weight. It is not. For most people, it simply will not. That's why you can go to the gym and you can go see runners and you can go anywhere, yoga, go to any place, and you'll see all these people doing all this stuff with the same bodies that don't change day in and day out.
Yeah.
That is a diet situation. Now, if you want to be tighter, if you want to look more athletic, yes, that's different. But if you want to lose weight, it's going to be diet. So think about exercise helps you lose fat while you're dieting, but exercise alone will do very little to change your body. And everyone gets that wrong because they're like, oh, I just go exercise like crazy. It doesn't work like that. You get your diet right. And by right, by the way, I don't mean right meaning, what I say. I don't mean right by what the American Heart Association says. I don't mean right by what any guru or diet book says. Yeah. I mean right for you, which is it's going to keep you full. It's going to manage your energy. It's going to keep you from having cravings. And at the end of the week, when you step on the scale or you put on your clothes, you are losing fat. That is the right diet. And that is going to vary from person to person.
Yeah.
You have to be, this is not a small point. This is huge because here's the kind of stuff that happens, right? Like right now, fat is in vogue. And so what happens is everyone's eating avocado, egg yolks, and bacon, right? And
coconut oil.
And coconut oil, right? Which to me it's fine. Some people are going to thrive there. Yeah. Most people, that's not going to be the thing that works for them. And then you have diet creep, right? So you go on this keto diet and you're eating all this fat, and then you start in your head having this halo, this healthy halo around fat. Oh my God, butter's now healthy and bacon's now healthy and all these things are healthy, but you slowly creep back in all the carbohydrates that you were eating before. So now all you've done is just elevate your caloric load because you're now eating all the fat that you have this healthy halo with, but you're also bringing in the crackers and all this kind of stuff as well. So to me, I would say, do not go to extremes and be very careful with your biases. There's nothing wrong with fat. There's nothing wrong with starch. There's nothing wrong with protein. It's simply finding what's best for you. We do know that the research shows, if there's one thing the research shows conclusively about diet, is that a plant-based vegetable, I should say vegetable-based, not plant-based, because plants can have a lot of starch in them, but a vegetable-based diet, the research is 100% clear. Eat most of your food as vegetables, period. Yeah. And then the research is fairly clear on the following. Next is lean proteins to keep you full. And then the research is not clear at all, regardless of what you have heard, it is not clear at all on fat and starch. So the way I say it is eat as many vegetables as you can, good quality protein to keep you full and satisfied, and then enough but not too much starch and fat and salt and alcohol and all the stuff that makes your food taste good, but not so much that you're going to make yourself fat. And most people, that takes time. How long does it take? 3 to 6 months to figure out that mix if you're paying attention. But after that, you never really have to diet again because now you understand the process of putting the right nutrition in for you. And then I'll ask you this question as well, but then there's the whole issue of hunger, right? Like bottom line is you have to learn to manage your hunger at some point. Like when I say control hunger, energy, and cravings, I mean controls, not that you won't have it. You should be able to feel hungry. A healthy metabolism should be able to feel hungry and not want to eat your arm. You should be able to feel hungry and ride that wave and have it dissipate. And most people cannot. So I oftentimes ask people, I'm like, so, you know, the people who've been successful, how did you manage that? Usually it is a process of just slowly controlling things, learning what to eat, when to eat it, learning how to ride particular waves of, you know, sort of hunger and cravings, and controlling that stuff. That is important. That's where things like fasting can be beneficial, not because it has magic properties, it lowers calories, but it can help you control hunger, learn to manage that feeling. So those are just all considerations. I mean, the way I like to look at it is like you have a toolbox, you know, there's a screwdriver in there, there's a hacksaw in there, there's a hammer in there. And these are analogous to the keto diet and the fasting approach and all these other dietary tools that you can use and can be beneficial at certain times. But as soon as that becomes your religion, as soon as that becomes your bias and your dogma, your metabolism goes, I don't work that way. I like change. I'm changeable. So don't try to fit me into a box.
Yeah, no, I love that. One of my hashtags is #Nutrition because it's so personalized to you.
I love that.
It has to be different because what's right for me is not going to be right for you. It's not going to be right for you. So, I mean, there's some overarching guidelines, and generally my biggest one is eat real food, which is essentially what you're saying when you say, you know, I think almost every single diet out there would agree at their fundamental core that vegetables should be the priority. But I mean, going even just a little bit deeper in there, when you're talking about like your microbiome and balancing all the good bacteria, what feeds that except all the real food? I mean, that's like the number one thing you have control over. And if your microbiome is going to affect your hormones and your weight and your energy and all these sorts of things, what do you have control over? Well, you can feed that and you can balance it through the food that you choose. And vegetables are super good at doing that.
Yeah, and I'll add one more extra thing and see what you think about this, honey. I agree completely. Real foods whenever possible, because real foods are going to be the things that typically are going to keep your hunger, your energy, and your cravings in check. At the same time, we also need to understand what real foods are like and the aspects of nutrition that a real food has so that we can look at processed foods and say, this is more real food than an Oreo, let's say. And the real foods, typically, if you're walking around out in nature, what you're going to find is you're going to find a lot of lean protein sources if you're a hunter, and a lot of vegetable matter if you're a gatherer. And then you're going to find a little bit of starch and a little bit of fat. That's really what you'll find. Animals in the real world do not have huge amounts of fat on them unless you catch them around, you know, late fall. You talk to hunters about this. They'll be like, you know, you kill a deer at a certain time. Most of the time it's going to be very lean. Other times it'll be fat. So that's what real food's like. So when you look at a label, you can look at food science has come a long way now to duplicate real food. But you have two types of packages. Most of the stuff out there is still this processed junk that's loaded with fat and sugar and salt. Real food is going to be loaded with fiber, vegetables, lower in starch and high in protein. And so you can look at a label, you know, because let's face it, again, we need to be convenient, right? So when oftentimes people say, okay, real food, that's great, but I can't cook, I'm busy all the time. Well, take what Kylene's saying about real food and then say, okay, what are the parameters of real food? They're very high in fiber, they're good quality protein, and they're not too high in starch and fat. There are plenty of new things out there and convenience foods out there that now are duplicating that. Lots of fiber, you know, so for example, when you look at the label, if you look at your total carbohydrates, you want to add the fiber and the protein and have it be more than that, preferably, right? So let's say the total carbs on that label's 30. You want, you know, something that has like 20 grams of protein and 15 grams of fiber. That's going to duplicate a meal of salmon, maybe, and kale and salad. And so that's the way you have to think about it, because I always go, okay, yeah, real food, we all need to be eating real food, but the bottom line is some people are going to have to eat convenience foods. What are the foods that they should choose, how to manage that? And so that's one easy way to do it.
Yeah, and normally when I say, when I teach my clients to look at the labels, I don't necessarily look so much. You're very much looking at like the macros, and I usually tell them to go ahead and look at the ingredients, because even with processed foods, you can usually get processed. My goal usually is to get a processed food out of convenience that technically if I had time, I could make at home. So I'll have them look at the ingredients and be like, are these ingredients that I would have maybe in my pantry if I had the time? And sure, go ahead and take that on your trip, take that in the car. But if it's something that's just got a lot of wacky words that are mostly man-made chemicals, then skip it.
That's definitely one.
A combination of the two perspectives, and then you can find a good balance.
Certainly, that's another way to look at it. I think that's the kind of education that people need to be paying attention to, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to shift gears here.
All right.
So you say you have been into personal development since you're about 18, which is kind of crazy. I think most people don't get into that until like 20s, 30s, maybe even like if at all. I think a lot of people don't even get into that at all. Yeah. So what's the difference between Jade at 20 and Jade now? Like what are big personal changes that you've seen growth wise?
Two big words: arrogance and ignorance. That's what it was. I mean, in my 20s, you don't know you're arrogant when you're arrogant. You know, I've always been accused of being arrogant. It's just the way I look. But I had this very self-righteous way about me in my 20s. People should do it this way. They should believe this way. They're all stupid. You know, why can't they figure it out? And now I kind of go, you know, I have things I believe. I don't know that they're right. They're simply my belief. I am open and want to learn from other people. I try to see myself as the most ignorant person in the room rather than trying to be right all the time. Those are the big differences. And I think, you know, bias, I oftentimes say this: bias and dogma are the parents of ignorance and arrogance. And what I mean by that is that when we think our way is the only way, there's no place to grow from that. And so we are unconsciously forcing ourselves into a box, and that we will live in that box for the rest of our lives. Now I love my grandparents, right? But we all have this experience where we go and talk to our grandparents. My grandparents aren't around anymore, but I remember going and talking to them. And some of the things that would come out of their mouths, they didn't even know, would sound racist to me or sexist to me, or just be, you know, in a different world. And I remember thinking then, and I was just like, wow, they just never caught up. The world, you know, they're stuck in this 1950s world, right? And they haven't grown, and they haven't learned, and they haven't read, and and to me, I've always been terrified of that. Like, to me, I'm like, if I'm going to work on my body and anti-aging, why do I want my brain and my thought process to be stuck in the past? I want to be learning and growing constantly. So I think I was a very certain oriented person in my 20s. I wanted to be like, I've got the world figured out. I'm smart. You're dumb. My team's the best. Your team sucks, basically. And now I just go, wow, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Wow, they have an interesting viewpoint. You know, I'll give you an example. I'm dating a girl right now who's very Christian. I'm not. I'm more agnostic, right? And so this is in my 20s. I would have been like, I am not going to church, just not doing it. But she puts on, what was she playing the other day? Pastor Rick Warren she had on. And I was like, oh, leave that on. I want to listen to that. And that's just different because I'm like, I'm just open to it. Doesn't mean I'm necessarily going to change my belief. It just means that I want to hear the perspective, right? And I didn't know this, but in Christianity, there's a lot of Stoicism. I'm a big fan of Stoic philosophy. Well, it makes sense because Stoicism was going on historically at the same time Christianity was evolving. And so I wouldn't know that otherwise, right? If I was stuck in my bias. And so to me, I'm always trying to expose myself to new things, and it's become a lifestyle. Here's what I would tell people. How many of us go and seek information that disagrees with us? And how many of us just seek information that agrees with us? So here's an example, and I'll just give you guys some of my political, you'll have to forgive me, I'll give you some of my political.
Okay, we're losing the connection.
I know, exactly. I'm going to talk about politics now. See, here's another thing. I like talking politics to people because I want to hear their perspective. But here's an example. So some of you will get mad at me and some of you will love me. By the way, I don't consider myself a Democrat or Republican. I can't stand either one of them.
Yeah.
Donald Trump, I happen to think, is a despicable person. So already people are mad at me, right? However, because of the way I think about Donald Trump, I'm constantly, first of all, I want him to do well. Because I hope I want him to.
It's good for all of us if he does well at this
exactly. But here's what's different. In my 20s, I would just go around telling everyone, I think Donald Trump's a despicable person. He does this. Now what I do is I've been going around and trying to figure out what are the things that he's doing well. Not everyone is so bad. So rather than just watching Fox News or MSNBC, I'm actually trying to be, open-minded about it. Like, he can't be all bad, Jade, and other people will be like, he can't be all good, by the way, for those of you who love him. And so to me, that's the major difference. It's like, why are we humans so intent on proving ourselves right all the time? How are you going to learn if you're always trying to think that you're the one that has all the answers? You're going to end up like one of those crotchety old, grandparents. Sorry, but you will. You just won't learn anymore. And I am not down for that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I remember you talking about that in September, and I think that's really an important thing for people. And you're mentioning your girlfriend's a Christian. I'm a Christian. I think one of the things, even in religion, is you have to question your faith, because if you don't question your faith, then you'll never really even get to the point where you know that it's yours. So, I mean, where does that where's that transition from, I was just taught this in anything, faith or politics or, anything in your life? There's a transition from, I was just taught this, so this is what I actually believe. And I think questioning that and doubting and kind of figuring other things out, that's really where you kind of come to your own belief system.
I love that. That's actually a really interesting perspective. I've heard very few people who are religious say to question your faith. And that's a really interesting thing.
Yeah.
For me, that's one of the things I've always, with religion, I've always been like, that's interesting, because faith is taking it on, like, I have faith, this is the way it is. Whereas I'm more science-based, I ask a lot of questions, but I do love the idea of that. I do think as a human, to know your beliefs, you have to challenge your beliefs.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I don't think a lot of people do question their faith. When it goes into the religion side of it, I think they're raised a certain way. And unfortunately, a lot of churches and denominations don't encourage that questioning. Yeah. And I always think it's really neat when there is a denomination or a church or family that says, why? Why do you believe this? And it, like you're saying, it goes into every aspect of life, but why?
I love that. Yeah.
So, okay. So as you have gone through this personal development and you intentionally seek out things you disagree with.
Yeah, I do.
This is sort of culminating into your Next Level Human project. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So share what that's all about.
Well, so here's the thing. I have this belief. I went through my own personal stuff. I'll give you guys just a brief background in this. So again, I have all the tools, right? I did counseling, couples counseling when I was in medical school, extra shifts. I've been doing self-development, self-help since I was 18. And I thought I had all the tools, and I went through a marriage, and I ran into things I never thought could ever happen, right? And partly because I did not have what I would call an honor code at the time. I thought I did, right? But I didn't really need it. To your point, I was confronted with things, and I realized, once you get the hard stuff happen in life, then you go, all right, what was I anchoring to at that time? And so to me, a next level human is exactly what you and I talked about. It's basically, I do think there are people out there like me who want to grow and get better, and that's the primary place that they come from. So I often talk about 3 levels of human. There's base level, which we all have, by the way. I have a base level self, and my base level self is the one that is fearful, insecure, wants to be right, all that kind of stuff. There's my culture level human that wants to fit in, that seeks status, that wants you to look at me and be like, Jade's smart, Jade has money, Jade drives a nice car, right? But then there's my next level human, and the next level human is the part of me that wants to, when I leave this earth, make a difference. I want the world to be better for my having been here. I want to touch, move, and inspire people. And in order for me to do that, I have what I call the 3 imperatives, which to me are, I need to learn first, which is why I try to learn from everybody. Then I can begin to teach. And the third part of that is to love and share, which to me it's love/share. And again, I'm not a Christian, but again, this is sort of, this is Christ-like in a sense from what I know about Christ, right? It's basically like, this is what life is about. And so a next level human comes at it from this growth point of view. Let me grow myself and let me commit to helping other people grow as well. And so my project now is to essentially say, all right, look, here's the experiences I've had. Here's, my philosophy, my psychology. I am, happier now than I've ever been, despite all the pain that I went through. I love my life. And I want to share that with other people. I feel like I'm ready to do that. And so, so next level human now is sort of like what I did with my company, Metabolic Effect. It's a coaching program for people who are like, I want to do something meaningful in life, and I'm feeling lost. I'm feeling like I'm not winning. I'm feeling like I'm not who I want to be or where I want to be, or I feel like I'm wrapped up in fear, or I feel like I'm wrapped up in the cultural way of looking at things. And I just want to, be in a place where I am doing something that when I leave this earth, I can be proud of what I did. And that to me is what a next level human is all about.
Yeah, focusing on a legacy instead of just survival.
Yeah.
There's a big difference, right?
Absolutely. You know what's funny about that? Legacy, some people think legacy is an egotistical thing, right? Because they think, oh, you want trophies of yourself and a monument. No, to me, the monument is how you touch people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's the ripple effect. When you interact with people in the world, you are impacting them so dramatically. Every little interaction, that's your legacy.
Yeah.
It's just like, I want people to be like, that guy was inspiring. He was kind. He was generous. And by the way, when you think about legacy, they won't ever say that. They won't say that guy. You don't get to they won't even know me. But I like the idea that, my nieces, my nephews, anyone who wrote my book, read my books or whatever, will impart some of that onto other people who will never know me and will not care. But I at least made a positive contribution to the universal collective is the way I look at it. And it's just to know that I did that, is all I need.
What would be like your biggest, what was like the one thing that you'd want to leave the most? Like what impact?
Yeah, this one's easy for me. That I have a thing in my honor code that says, give so freely that it shocks people and they are inspired to do the same. I would want people to start to, and again, I would want to make a difference where people would be like, I am going to change the way I interact with individuals from the perspective of generosity with my time, my money, my resources, instead of being like, it's all about me. I would like for people to be like, I am inspired to help others. And so again, it's funny, my friends who are, it's very religious, type of thing. That's what I want to impart on people. If I can help people be more generous, I would love that, or be more kind, or take more time. That's what I want.
Yeah, that's really cool. All right. I have another saying. It's actually my group on Facebook. It's called Stop Dieting and Live Your Life. So I like to ask everybody at the end of the podcast, what's one thing that you would say for people to focus on the most in order to help them to stop dieting and start actually just living their lives?
Yeah, to me, it's very easily what we talked about with the stress management. Is that to me, it's stop trying to do everything, and instead focus on the things that make you better able to manage those things. For example, a 10-minute nap refocuses you. Yeah. It's far better than trying to plow through. A brief walk is amazing for, resetting your brain. So I oftentimes look at it like this: do the things that make everything else easier instead of doing all the things that make everything else harder. And most people don't think about it like that. That has nothing to do with diet and exercise. I'm talking about do these things so that you are more motivated to exercise naturally. and that you are less hungry and have less cravings to begin with, instead of fighting yourself nonstop. And those things are going to be, walking is huge. So to me, I would walk before I did any exercise. Sleep is huge. I would make sure I sleep, I nap for anything else. Hot baths, time alone, meditation, all these things are where you want to put your effort. And if you're overwhelmed with all those, choose one. Literally, all you need to do is choose one. I'm going to take a 10-minute nap, every afternoon. I'm going to make that happen. Even if I have to go out, leave the office, go sit in my car and take a 10-minute nap. That is going to charge you up. And the research, by the way, this is research-based as well. It's absolutely clear that these are the things that will make a difference. So to me, if you keep focusing on diet and exercise, you're going to fail again and again and again because you don't have the energy to do diet and exercise.
Yeah. So basically what you're saying is chill out.
I am saying chill out, and I'm saying chill out, and you have to plan for chilling out. That's what people don't understand. They're like, okay, I'll just chill out. I'm like, well, what's your plan to chill out? Are you taking a nap? Are you going to meditate? Are you going to sleep and go to sleep an extra hour? Are you going to take a walk? Because you do have to plan that.
Yeah. Okay, so where can people find you on social media or your website? Is your Next Level Human dropping soon? Do you have a launch date for that, or?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to be launching Next Level Human in a few days, actually. My first mastermind, yeah. And so, it's interesting. You can follow me on Instagram if you want. Instagram is where I love spending my time, but it's kind of not, put it this way, you'll get my true personality on Instagram.
Yeah.
It's not, Instagram is more of a personal thing that I do, but
Sure.
At Jade Teta on Facebook and jadeteta.com. But if you want to get a sense of who I really am, and a lot of the conversations we just had here is really who I am. I just have a goofy 4-year-old side of me that sometimes shows up in my stories on Instagram. And so, but yes, Instagram at Jade Teta, Facebook at Jade Teta, jadeteta.com.
Perfect. And didn't you just get a new dog?
It's actually, that's my girlfriend's dog I'm babysitting.
Oh, okay. I was like, I see a new dog face.
Yeah, it's a little Ewok. I mean, the thing is ridiculously
It's adorable.
Cute. Yeah, it's adorable. Yeah. So I always used to think, I was like, I don't like it's a Yorkie, a white Yorkie. And I was like, I don't like those rug dogs, but now I'm in love with her, of course. You know what I mean? She's so sweet. So yeah.
Well, they just love everybody. So
yeah, they're so sweet. Although Pip is still my favorite. Pip is still my ex. Yeah, Pip the Posse is still my favorite.
I see her in your videos a lot too.
I get to babysit for her a lot. Jill will be like, "Can you take Pip?" And I want to. She knows that I want to take her all the time. I don't have a dog, so it's like cool to spend time with her.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Now that you've got 2 dogs in your life, you might have to get one that's yours.
I know. I'm definitely I'm great as the stepdad. I'm not.
Oh yeah, here I take him for 2 hours. You take him back.
Exactly. I'll take him for a week. You take him back.
All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
It's good to see you, my friend.